morning and welcome to this special meeting of the Berkeley Unified School District Personnel Commission on July 28th. Can we have call to order?
Yes. Chairperson Alpert?
Present.
Vice Chairperson Roeder?
Here.
Commissioner Goldstein? Present.
Thank you very much. We are going to do public comment first. And do we want to, she's coming in person, right? Is there, well, let's go to public comment. We don't have a special section for union comment, but I want to give the union time to present on the issue. And I know that the Vice President of BCCE will have some words, so we'll wait for her to get here and then go to her. But let's go to general public comment. Are there any folks in the room or on Zoom wishing to make public comment? And if so, please raise your hand.
None.
Really?
None
Okay.
so far.
I was expecting a lot of public comment, but in that case, we'll go to approval and adoption of the agenda. Are there any motions on the agenda?
I move approval of the agenda.
I second.
Normally we have to talk about consent and everything, but this time it's so easy. Great. We will, and I agree, so the agenda is adopted. And Mildred, we just did public comment, but I would want to give you time to speak. So do you want to speak now, or do you want to have us talk first and then you want to speak? Yeah. All right, so why don't let's get a presentation from staff and some initial questions, and then we'll turn to the union's comment, and then we can have our comments. So, Executive Director, take it away.
Sure. So this item here is the approval of the Spanish bilingual designation for the after-school program specialist at Sylvia Mendez. So as you all know, the Sylvia Mendez is the district Spanish-English dual immersion school. The district believes that requiring Spanish language proficiency for this position will help the employees support the school's program, students, families, and the community. The board approved the bilingual designation at their June 17th meeting. And so now, per Merit Rule 30.200.8, the designation also requires approval from the Personnel Commission. And then just wanted to note that this position, I've included and I've attached the board doc that went to the board, but it's clear that the position is not currently vacant. So this change would not displace or otherwise affect any current employee in the position. And the bilingual requirement would only take effect if the position does become vacant and the district begins a new recruitment.
Thank you. I guess we'll first go to questions from my fellow commissioners. Did you have any questions?
I'll wait for you.
Okay. Then why don't we go, Mildred, are you ready? Or whoever is speaking from the union. And then also if the district has any comment or context they want to provide.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Morning.
Okay. All right. So, good morning, commissioners. Thank you for allowing BCC the opportunity to speak today. I respectfully ask that you carefully consider a long-term impact of changing the after-school program specialist classification to require bilingual proficiency. I want to begin by saying this clearly. BCCE supports students and families. We support meaningful communication with every member of our community. Nothing I say today should be interpreted as minimizing the importance of language access. Families deserve to be heard and supported. However, the question before the Commission is not whether bilingual communication is valuable, it is. The question before you is whether bilingual proficiency is an essential function of this classification. For years, this position has successfully served students and families without being designated as bilingual. The essential duties have not changed. Students have continued to receive quality services, families have continued to receive support, and bilingual staff have been available to assist when language support has been needed. Our greatest concern is that today's decision will not only affect the employee in this position, it will affect every current and future after-school program specialist who serves this district. Employees have spent years, and in many cases, decades, building seniority under this classification with the understanding that the merit system would govern transfers, promotions, layoffs, and reemployment rights. If this classification changes, employees who have dedicated decades of service could suddenly find that their seniority carries less value than it does today. So we respectfully ask, how is that equitable? Keeping this classification as it exists today protects every employee equally and preserves the fairness and consistency that the merit system was created to protect. I also ask you to consider consistency across the district. The Bears Before School program serves students and communicates with families, yet that position is not designated as bilingual. If bilingual proficiency has now become an essential function of this position, what has changed? Which essential duties are different today than they were for many years this position successfully operated without a bilingual requirement? If the essential functions have not changed, then why should the classification change? I also asked you to think about the future. What happens when the current employee leaves? Will making bilingual proficiency mandatory make it more difficult to recruit qualified applicants for this position? Perhaps there's a solution that supports everyone. Instead of making bilingual proficiency a mandatory qualification for this classification, consider making it a preferred qualification when recruiting for future vacancies. Doing so would encourage bilingual applicants to apply while preserving the seniority rights of current employees and maintaining the integrity of the merit system. It supports our families while also protecting fairness and equity for every employee in this classification. I believe that is a solution that respects everyone, the union and the parents. I respectfully ask that you base your decision on the essential functions of the position, preserve the integrity of the merit system, and protect the seniority rights of the employees who have faithfully served this district. So I'm going to leave you with one final thought. The merit system exists to protect positions from being shaped by individuals. Individuals should fit the position. The position should not be rewritten to fit the individual. Thank you for your time and your thoughtful consideration.
Thank you for your comments. Are there any other comments from either the district or the union before we have our discussion? Okay, not seeing any. So I just wanted to start off by really appreciating the parents and community who brought this issue to us, and the district for taking this very seriously, and the union for giving their considered comments. Oh, yes, that's fine. Let's go to that comment, and then we'll continue. And you got 2 minutes or so. We'll be flexible.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, hi, my name's David Filippini. I'm a parent of Sylvia Mendez and home of a bilingual family. As you guys know, Sylvia Mendez is made up of different types of families. There are Spanish-speaking families, and entirely. There's English-speaking families, and then there's other language families, and then there's bilingual families like my own. And essentially, the community of Sylvia Mendez sees this particular need as related to the master plan that of a multilingual master plan that the city has essentially promoted, and this is the reason why the campus of Sylvia Mendez has been designated as a bilingual school and two-way immersion school, and our program has essentially changed in terms of the needs for our specific school. And also I'll note that It is true that Longfellow is seen as essentially the school where families from Sylvia Mendez will eventually go to. And to meet the needs of our bilingual community and the program itself, as well as the needs of the master plan, I would say this has changed the overall need and has essentially been our position. I'm not personally looking for a solution that makes bilingual requirements a need for every single school in the district. I don't think that makes any sense. But I do see a need specifically for Sylvia Mendez, possibly Longfellow, to support the bilingual community as which essentially BUSD has seen as a need. And so that's essentially our position. And I respectfully, want to just share that, yes, the needs have changed. By centralizing a bilingual community to a particular school, the needs have definitely changed. So thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other folks with their hands up online? All right. So as I was saying, wanted to thank the parents who've been advocating on this issue in the community at Sylvia Mendez, the district for working on this issue, and the union for their consideration as well. I know this is an issue that impacts multiple parties, and it's important for us to take all those things seriously. I'll just say, first and foremost, I think I will be supporting the request to reclassify this position as bilingual. But I do want to recognize the concerns that the union has raised, and it is a real impact. When we make a position bilingual, that does have an impact on bumping rights and on the kind of issues of seniority around layoffs. I was in an immersion elementary school. Well, I was in an immersion program in a multilingual elementary school in San Francisco Public Schools, and I really appreciate the need for bilingual staff to support a bilingual community, especially a bilingual community that includes monolingual Spanish-speaking families. But that also doesn't mean that every single position at that school needs to be bilingual, right? I don't think it is our intention or the district's intention that everyone from the janitor to the bus driver needs to be bilingual to serve Sylvia Mendez. That being said, there are positions that will be able to better serve the community when they are bilingual, and I think it's very important for us to listen to the kind of perspective and experience of those families who are receiving those services when determining which of those positions are more critical to be bilingual. I think they're the kind of people who are best positioned to analyze which positions are having an impact on the community in a way that will serve the community by a bilingual role. And so, Mildred, I really appreciated your comment, and I want to recognize this does not have any bearing on the services that previous BCCE employees in those positions served, right? We are not in this saying that those employees were not providing good services or sufficient services. Just because the services might be enhanced by a bilingual employee in that role doesn't mean that the previous employees were not doing a good job, and I want to make sure that we recognize that and appreciate the folks who were in that role before for the services they were providing. And also, I think it's important for us to consider where we can make bilingual preference rather than requirement may be sufficient in other roles in Sylvia Mendez and or Longfellow. But certainly, not every position should be automatically bilingual. In terms of the issue of bumping rights, I do want to when an employee bumps another employee because of layoffs, it's critical for that employee to be eligible to serve in that role, right? And so, yes, if an employee is not bilingual and there's a bilingual role, they won't be able to bump into it. And that does have an impact on the union, and it does have an impact on those employees. And that is an impact that we have to weigh in consideration with all of the services that we're providing to the community through those roles. And so in this situation, I think one position being changed is not a massive impact on the ability to bump. But as we increase the number of positions, if we do increase the number of positions that are bilingual, it will have every position is more impact, and we'll have to consider how we address that impact as that potentially grows. So those are my thoughts. I'm looking forward to hearing from my fellow commissioners, and go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I agree with everything you just said. I do also and I think it's worth reiterating, thank the Sylvia Mendez community, the parents, for having come out and asserted their position and their feelings about this, and at the same time, very much appreciative of BCCE's statements regarding sort of the structural impact, which I think is the role of this Personnel Commission to review. And that's why, I'm going to go back to our rule and see if the provisions of the rule have been satisfied or not. But before that, one question is, if I remember correctly, during my tenure so far on the commission, as I recall, there has been at least one position which was designated as a bilingual, Spanish-speaking, multi-language position at Sylvia Mendez. If my memory serves me right, that might have been for a media specialist, but I could be wrong about that. Can you clarify that, Erin, please?
Yeah, so at some point and it's only when there are vacancies, but at some point there was the library media specialist position. And so when it became vacant, the school requested that it become a bilingual position. The school admin too, I believe, a few years prior to that also went through the same process.
I see. And as I recall, the way we analyzed it is, on the commission, is that under our rules, it's the Board of Education that makes the initial determination, and the rule says the Board of Education may designate positions within a class which require the holder of the position to speak, read, and write a language in addition to English. So in the first instance, it's the Board of Education. I didn't read the little parenthetical which says, with the approval of the commission. And that's where we are now, is the approval of the commission. But in the first instance, it's the Board of Education. So I think you've said this already, but I want to make sure this is true, that it is the case, and I remember reading this in the minutes of the Board of Education meeting, that the Board of Education did, in fact, decide to make this position at Sylvia Mendez a bilingual position.
That's correct, yes.
And if I remember correctly also, that the memorandum, which I think came from Assistant Superintendent Tobias Espinoza, said specifically that this designation, if approved, would not displace a current specialist. It would only occur in the event of a vacancy, which I guess could also occur through transfer and other means, but of a vacancy. And there is no such vacancy right now as we sit here. But nonetheless, we're being proactive that if and when a vacancy occurs, then if this is approved, it would need to be a bilingual individual.
Correct.
That's also correct. Okay. So I read 30.200.8A. Now, B says the board must clearly set forth valid reasons for placing language requirements on a position. So I think that's the standard. I think that's actually our standard that we have to go by, which is valid reasons. You know, it's not for us to determine the validity of the reasons or not, but did they set forth valid reasons? As I see it, that's a relatively low bar. It's not zero, but it's not a high bar either. So I guess I would ask either Erin or the assistant superintendent or someone to just summarize those valid reasons that the Board of Education, through your memo, gave for approving this position as bilingual.
I probably want to defer to Samantha on this. I do believe that the request came in to support that dual language program at Sylvia Mendez, and so ultimately that was the valid reason set forth. But yeah, I'd probably defer to Sam.
So yes, that was the overarching reason. Other reasons that have been brought up include the security of the site, that person being basically sort of the supervisor of the site during the after-school program, and needing to have the language skills to be able to talk to parents as well as community members.
Okay, well, I, for one, and from what I've heard from the parents and community members, and, you know, I've watched a lot of the Board of Education meetings, there are valid reasons. There are valid reasons probably going in the other direction too, which Vice President Sher brought up, but, you know, these are valid reasons to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
I'll reiterate, appreciating both sides advocating so vigorously for this. And I do have a question, and I think probably, Sam, it's best to you. I think one of the reasons there has been so much about this is, you know, a question of need, right? And we heard a reference to the master plan. Sam, can you tell us what is the master plan and just a little bit about how that dovetails with this?
So a few years ago, the district wrote up a master plan on multilingualism in the district, and it basically talks about our TWI program or our bilingual program at Sylvia Mendez, as well as our ELE supports and other supports of our students, including, I believe there's a bilingual seal that some of our students get on their diplomas and things of that sort. And so it talks about the support that we need to provide in staffing. This position was not identified in that report, but it is a support at a site that does have our bilingual program, our one and only bilingual elementary program.
Thank you. Do other people have questions just about the master plan? No? I have one other set of questions, if you don't mind. And that has to do with the fact that I'm also aware that this is a position every year that comes up during layoff season. And, you know, it, among many others, you know, it's just the nature of the beast of how we're structured, you know, always gets a layoff notice. What I'm more interested in understanding is, you know, certainly for last year, because I'm sure it's fresh in your mind, and then if you remember previous years, more or less, you know, would be interested in that too, to understand how many of the positions get restored and how many were actually laid off, at least, you know, this past year.
So it's actually, there's multiple positions within the after-school program that have been involved in the layoffs. And the positions that have actually been noticed for the last 3 years in a row have been the after-school program site coordinators, which is a local 21 position above this program specialist position. Those positions were actually eliminated by the board this year in the round of layoffs. And the people who were in those positions were placed back into program specialist positions, meaning the position that you guys are discussing today. We have no intention of continuing to notice this group of people. We feel these program specialists are an important part of the after-school program, and our goal is actually to expand our after-school program to reduce, if not eliminate, our wait list. And so we are working very hard on that. We have created, with your assistance, a new position called the program lead, which is a higher position than the prior mentioned coordinator, but lower than the existing program supervisor position. And that position, we are working on getting an eligibility list and filling those positions. And so those positions may, for lack of a better way to say it, move some of these program specialists back up into management. But the goal is to keep all 12 of these program specialists, one at each site, to help manage the program on a daily basis.
Thank you so much for explaining that, because over the years in my tenure on this commission, I've watched BUSD try out several different iterations of how they want to provide after-school support. And, you know, I have to give the district credit for this because it's important. It's important support for the kids, it's important support for the families, it's important to do it right. And we've tried a couple different ways to handle that. And I know that doing this affects employee seniority because we keep using different job classes. You know, how stable do you think this new iteration is?
I think, well, I would assume that it's going to last for probably at least 2 school years, if not longer, this current iteration, because we want to see whether or not it works. And it's hard to say in its first year whether or not something works because you're still figuring out the kinks and the problems and solving things and all of that. So my guess is that this would stay for at least 2 years. But I mean, who knows, if we were to lose all of our funding for after-school program, that would be a very big impact on this.
That would be very sad. I hope
Yes.
that never happens. Yeah. So, you know, and I realize this might seem a little off topic to folks, but I think these two issues are married. How we handle after school generally is important. And I think that pertains to the union's concerns about equity and seniority and bumping if we have to bump. And I'm pretty satisfied with your answer that, and Erin, help me with this. I think what the merit rules say is if you have served in a particular class and then you serve in a higher class, when you get bumped back to the lower class, is your seniority bridged from the higher class to the lower class or no?
So you'll you'll look back at the time spent in that previous class, and then you'll start from that time that you left the position, and then you go back.
Got it. Okay, so
But like there's 2 seniorities you would look at, so we also still look at district seniority, which stays the same for all the time that you've served in the district.
So let me just try the question another way to make sure we all have a common understanding. So, you know, for people who served in the program specialist role for several years, you know, they have some amount of time. They move to, you know, the program coordinator role, and let's say they've got 2 more years there. If in this last round of reorganization,
Layoffs.
they were moved back to the specialist role, they are picking up their classification tenure where they left off.
Right.
However, their overall tenure at the district includes
Yes.
both roles.
Yes.
Right? And for bumping, just, you know, so that we're clear, when we bump by classification. So your total district tenure doesn't matter as much as your tenure in the actual class.
Yeah.
All right, so, you know, I think, you know, as the union is expressing their concern about equity, you know, that's the concern. The people, you know, as the district experimented with what's the best way to run the program, there were a group of people who got moved into a class and, you know, have served, but really don't take that tenure, that credit, service credit, with them back in the class that they have been moved to.
Well, I think the main concern, I don't want to speak for them, but from conversations we've had, is that if there is a newly hired bilingual employee, that when, let's say, if it were to happen, which we don't think it's going to happen anytime soon, but a specialist must be, or specialists must be laid off, that somebody with more seniority could be laid off before the bilingual, the more newly hired bilingual
Right.
specialist. And so I think that's the main worry there,
Right.
that's how it could impact
No,
that.
and I appreciate that. I think what I was trying to get at was to understand for the population of people that we're talking about. Let me try to put it this way. There was some small number of people who stayed in the specialist class and didn't move to the coordinator class. So they got 2 more years of, you know,
Yes.
credit, if you
As
will, in that
specialists.
role, than the people who, you know, were promoted and then have been moved back to the specialist.
Right.
So how many people is that who
There were 5.
had the benefit of, continuing in the specialist role? So
There were 5.
Five
That
people.
stayed, that remained as
Okay.
specialists.
So we're talking about one position that is, we're looking at making bilingual. And, when I sort of consider individuals affected, which, of course, the program needs to serve the needs of the district, but I also want to understand individuals. This is a problem for a class. It's a problem for a group of people. This is not one person who is getting, excluded in a way that is really unfortunate, and I get, that there is a small class of 5 people, who got additional tenure in the role, from the other 8 or so who moved to the.
It's 7.
7 to the program coordinator roles, and it's hard to be fair to everyone. So anyway, this is a long way of saying, as a result, I do think there are valid reasons for establishing the bilingual program. For the program that is occupied now, I understand it's not vacant now, do we expect it to be vacant anytime soon?
It's possible with the program lead that it could become vacant if somebody's promoted into the program lead, that we would have a vacancy.
Got it. All right. And what I guess I'm hearing is that this person who's in this role now is a candidate for the program lead.
The person who's in the role now, I don't even know if they've applied, but it's
Okay.
possible that there could be transfers that happen. This person chose Sylvia Mendez, the person who's currently in that site, chose Sylvia Mendez because they didn't have the seniority to keep the site they were at previously.
Got it.
And so they may, if something was to shift, decide to go elsewhere.
Which is a pretty standard dynamic. Things are shifting all the time. Somebody quits or somebody makes a decision to leave or they get promoted and then all the pieces get moved around anyway.
Yeah, we
All
just
right.
wanted to make sure, as Mr. Roeder shared in the memo that went to the board, is that we do want to preserve the rights of the person who's currently in the position to have a job, based on the seniority that they currently have.
Sure.
And that this was a process that was started very late in the game in terms of when we were doing the placements for layoffs. So we do want to make sure that we're all on the same page as to the fact that any decision to make a position bilingual would only happen once that position become effective, once that position is vacant.
Right, which would be also a pretty standard,
Yeah.
good thing to do to avoid employment law problems later.
Yes.
So, all right, thank you. I appreciate that, and I'm pretty satisfied, that, at least I understand, I hope everybody understands what some of the dynamics were with this after-school program and how the positions have moved and what the tenure impacts are.
It seems like you want to say something. Go ahead.
I do. I just want to make some clarifications and just understand some things. So I think I want to start with, when we were talking about the master plan for the after-school program, does that master plan include, or the master plan that the district has for bilingual, does that master plan include after-school program? Because they always state that the after-school program is not part of the school or the education system. So I want, to think about that. And then to what Commissioner Goldstein was stating is that I think that I could even, or the union may position could look at this differently if this doesn't always come up when it comes to layoffs. So as soon as there's a particular person that families want, and this again, this is not speaking against families, I understand that. What I'm just trying to get us to understand is that even before coming here today, and all week, or once the agenda went out, and others in that role seeing the agenda, we receive phone calls because they are the ones that are in this role, and they do have concerns because it's not equitable to them to have done this work and have been doing this work, but we're creating a position to obtain an individual because it only came up because of layoffs. And I don't believe that if layoffs ever happen, that we would even be sitting here talking about this particular position needs to become bilingual. Also, Ed Code, and just reading Ed Code, and Commissioner Roeder, you good at this. You like these codes. So I'm just, and Frank and I have been talking a lot about it. We may read it or see it differently, but it says, according to Education Code Section 45401, Schools hitting this 50% metric must hire at least one bilingual individual for an administrative office as soon as a position becomes available. This staff member serves as a bilingual community liaison, paraprofessional, or clerical employee to bridge the communication gap between the schools and the families. Now, I do understand that it says at minimum, but majority of the school at Sylvia Mendez is bilingual. And I think we're overlooking that. This one particular position is not going to make a difference. And then also, if you understand the role of the position, that individual is not the ones that's going to be as hand-on as the instructional technicians in the after-school program. Again, I understand the families' concerns, and we support the families. And we want to make sure that we give the families, you know, what they want in an equitable way. But how about, again, if we listen to what I stated earlier, it's come to a common ground where, and we've talked about this before, Executive Assistant Aranez, is that why can't executive director, I am so
I was going to
sorry.
say.
Executive director of the Personnel Commission, is that why can't we make it or just lean more towards preferred instead of making it a permanent, which could hinder and hurt us going further. But I also do not want us to ignore the concerns that the people that are in the position now, how they feel. Because we're saying we just have to do this for, basically, this is for an individual, because if it wasn't for an individual, then this is something that would have come up prior to layoffs. And it comes up, it happened the year before. They wanted to change another position to bilingual. So at this particular school. So I just want us to really take into consideration, is it really a need for this particular classification? Thank you.
Thank you for that. I want to respond to a couple of the points there. I guess I disagree that the layoffs are the main reason that we're seeing this conversation. They may have an inciting cause. I mean, maybe the layoffs triggered this conversation. Oh, I don't know what that was. But I think it's pretty clear that there's a shifting, as the needs of the community have shifted, it's the needs of the, and the after-school program has changed its structure. There have been changing needs. And so, my understanding, based on what's been said, is that this person is essentially in charge of the campus after school, right? And I agree that person should be bilingual if they're serving a primarily bilingual community. I think that's did you really want to, yeah.
And I do want to add, for Mildred and BCCE, this isn't permanent, so we can definitely revisit this, as the merit rule says, that when there is a position with approved language requirements, when it does become vacant again, the board needs to notify the commission that those requirements are still, needed. So we can always revisit this when it does become vacant again.
Yeah. But to the point, about preference versus requirement, I think certainly for the bilingual, for the people under this person, I think a preference makes a lot of sense, right? Not every person who's serving the after-school program needs to be bilingual, but it makes sense to have a preference for bilingual, bilingual people in that role. I don't know, yeah, go ahead, more discussion.
Let's see, following up, I would say, on Commissioner Goldstein's comment, and also I think the one that Chairperson Albert just mentioned, in terms of, and this goes, it's a little bit of a digression, but we've been doing that and I think it's appropriate, for the after-school specialists in general. My recollection of sort of the theory and the history of recent history of it is that the parents, not just at Sylvia Mendez, but everywhere, the parents and the district and the union too, recognized that there was nobody in charge, put it that way, of the schools during the after-school program. And in fact, it was the specialists who took on that responsibility of being and I'm going to put it in air quotes, in charge, but technically, under their job description, they weren't really in charge. And that was brought up, that fact was brought up to us, I think, on multiple occasions by BCCE, and it seemed correct. So the district decided, well, let's have coordinators. And coordinators will be Local 21 employees. They will supervise, because in the past, it was really the person in charge was the principal, and the principals weren't there after school, many of them. So there was really kind of nobody in charge. And that's a big problem in the after-school program. So then the district tried coordinators. Well, for whatever reason, there were, and probably budgetary being among the biggest reasons, the coordinators, we decided on a reorganization again, and now we have leads who will perform a lot of the sort of, I want to use the term paperwork, but it's more than just paperwork. It's how the administration, it's how the district gets paid by the state of California and by the government for these programs. So it's very important paperwork. But the leads, as I understand it, will not actually, they may visit the schools from time to time, but they're not going to be on the ground day to day at the schools. So now we're back, I think, to the specialists being in charge. And my editorial point is, and this is going to be a matter of collective bargaining and discussions inside the district, maybe it's time to take another look at the job description for the specialists and recognize the responsibilities that they do perform and provide some compensation for that responsibility. That would not be illogical to me to take a look at that. And I guess I would suggest taking a look at that, because we want to retain our really good specialists in the positions that they have. So that's one thing. The other thing is, and I guess I wasn't really aware until Commissioner Goldstein brought it up, is about bumping and seniority, and the fact that when a vacancy occurs or a layoff occurs, and we're looking at bumping, that we're looking at it with respect to the classification, and therefore, if someone had been a specialist for a number of years, then became a coordinator for a couple of years, that period of time in which they were the coordinator would not count toward their toward the bumping, toward their seniority for that classification. So is that a correct statement?
As a specialist, no, it would not count. But, yeah. And
It doesn't count if we're just looking at straight specialist. In the layoff process, it did count. We did consider those 2 years in the analysis of seniority when we were looking at placing the people who had been laid off from the coordinator roles. But it doesn't count in their basic seniority date as a specialist.
As a specialist, if they were going to bump into other specialist positions, for example.
Right, if they were going to bump into something else, if they're applying and competing against somebody who's in a similar position to them, we would have to talk about what the impact would be, but there is sort of a different calculation when we're looking at layoffs, especially when a position is completely eliminated, versus when we're talking about transfers and simple moves within just the seniority, of like who gets to pick which assignment first, type of thing.
Well, I think that this specialist to coordinator, back to specialist again situation was kind of a unique type of situation. And once again, it's not my role exactly to editorialize, but what the heck, I'll editorialize anyway.
And not all 7.
Let me just,
sorry.
final comment is, that might be something to talk about with BCCE about, because it doesn't seem fair that people went up to being a coordinator, kind of in the same sort of role, and then they go down to specialist, and now that those years as coordinator don't count. And that could be taken care of, I think, in collective bargaining, I would imagine.
Yeah, so out of the 7, not all of them were program specialists before they became coordinators. Some of them were in different positions in the district. And so that was taken into consideration when we did their new seniority, when we were placing them after the layoff. We also had a couple of people who were hired externally, one of them still with us. And unfortunately, that person has the lowest seniority. But we did go through the list and give them that placement. We can talk about it, and it is something that we can continue to negotiate. But I think also there is a piece of it where we want to make sure that we're also valuing the people who did stick to the position and stayed in the specialist positions also. And honor
Thank
that experience.
Before we continue, I want to recognize that we have the superintendent here, and if you had any comments, Madam Superintendent, that you wanted to make, please feel free.
I do not have any comments, but to say good afternoon. I think that Sam is doing a great job representing the district, and happy to see you all here and glad that we're having this discussion.
Thank you. You may continue.
So those are my questions. Thank you.
Go ahead. All right, in that case, I think that we are prepared to vote unless there's any further, one last opportunity for public comment, but if there's any hands. All right, then is there a motion?
Okay. I'll move that we approve the Board of Education's designation of the after-school specialist position at Sylvia Mendez to be bilingual.
I'll second.
And I agree. And I want to thank again the district, the union, and the parents for their feedback and recognize this is an ongoing conversation about how to best address Sylvia Mendez and bilingual needs in our community. In that case, that takes us to the balance of our conference items. We'll turn to public comment. We've had plenty of public comment, but is there any other public comment that folks want to make online or in person? Feel free to raise your hand. Not seeing any. We will turn to our next meeting. Our next meeting will be the next regular meeting.
August 26th.
August 26th. We look forward to seeing everyone there. And is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll motion.
And I'll second. And Commissioner Roeder approves with his mic on. All right, thank you all very much, and the meeting is adjourned.